Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon to you all. Welcome to another Griffith Alumni Professional Development webinar for this year. I'm really excited about today's topic, which is all around building your personal leadership and being an effective bystander. This is a really powerful topic and one we're exceptionally proud to be presenting today. The month of May is Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Month, which aims to raise community awareness of domestic and family violence and coercive control, and importantly, the support services available. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all located today. I acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. My name is Bridget French. I'm the Senior Alumni Engagement Manager here at Griffith University, and like most of you, I'm a proud Griffith alumnus. I completed my MBA here in 2020. In just a few moments, I'll introduce our fantastic guest speaker, alumnus Shaan Ross-Smith, who will share her background, her incredible expertise in this area, and the MATE Bystander initiative. In addition to these online webinars, many of you will know that we host a variety of networking and professional development events throughout the year. A really great way to stay across these opportunities is our LinkedIn showcase page. And if you aren't following this, can you please jump on now? There's a link in the chat function. You can jump on there and follow that page. Now, if you are new to Teams Live, there are a few things to help make the most of it. You can ask questions in the Q&A panel on your screen. Please do ask questions throughout the presentation and we'll share them with Shaan to answer. If you would like to remain anonymous when asking those questions, please tick that anonymous box. I'll also let you know that this session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel. We'll email you in a few weeks when that's available, and it's probably best if you subscribe to the channel to be notified immediately. And you can also see the other fabulous webinars we have on offer there, the ones we recorded last year and earlier this year. Now, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Shaan Ross-Smith, Director of MATE Bystander Program and a proud Griffith alumnus with a Bachelor of Psychological Science. Shaan commenced at Griffith University in 2016 as the Director of the MATE Violence Prevention Program. Prior to this, she spent 16 years working with prisoners through her various managerial and director roles with Queensland Corrective Services. This included being the Director of Offender Rehabilitation Management across Queensland. Shaan commenced an appointment on the Board of Directors with DV Connect in 2015, and as the former Chair of the Board, Shaan was instrumental in the business transformation of the telephone system and the business processes at DV Connect. Shaan's tireless passion for ending gender-based violence is truly amazing. She was named one of Queensland's Voices Female Leaders in 2019, and in 2020, Shaan was named on the inaugural Queensland Domestic Violence Prevention Honour Roll for her contribution towards the prevention of domestic and family violence. So now I will ask her to unmute her microphone and hand over to Shaan Ross-Smith.
Thanks, Bridget. I always get nervous when people do an intro like that because I think I better live up to all that. Sounds like hype, but I'll do my best. Thanks, Bridget, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to share my presentation screen with everyone, so give me a little moment. Hopefully everyone can see that. So I'm joining you from the MATE Bystander program. Before we get started and talking about the program, I too want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're sitting on today. I come to you from the lands of the Kumbamerri saltwater people of the Yugambeh language, and I'm on Bundjalung country today in Queensland. I'm really fortunate to come to you from the lands of the Kumbamerri people because my children go to school, a school on the Gold Coast here where they learn the Yugambeh language, which I think is just such an incredible asset for them and something I wish that I had have learned when I went through my schooling. And so, yeah, I live here, I play here, I work here, but it's lands of learning and teaching. The Kumbamerri saltwater people were really big on giving back to community, making sure that we evolve as people as we grow and learn. And so I'm hoping that today we can do a lot of that on the lands of the Kumbamerri saltwater people and wherever you're joining me from today. A bit of self-care before we start. So some of what I'm going to talk about today, and just by virtue of my background, the things that I've done, some of the examples that I use can elicit some strong emotions and distressing emotions. I just want to let everyone know that I completely respect your autonomy. You are under no obligation to stay and put yourself through this. If anything you hear is distressing, please reach out to me after the session, or you can also reach out to 1-800-RESPECT, which is a free 24-hour, 7-day-a-week counselling service. It's actually part of it is run by DV Connect in Queensland. So, who am I and what am I doing here? Like Bridget said, I did my degree on the Gold Coast campus of Griffith. It's really interesting going back there now as a staff member and not a student, because I can't walk to lectures with a beer in hand. It's very different to the good old days. But it's actually really exciting that I can go back to somewhere where my values so completely aligned. And so I finished my psychology degree in 2001 and went straight into working in the prison system here in Queensland and Queensland Corrective Services. And I loved every moment of my 16 years working there, but I had no idea what I was doing for a huge chunk of that. So, you finish your uni degree and you go out into the workforce. And I remember day one, they handed me a caseload of people and they said to me, here, Shaan, this is your caseload of people you're supervising now. They're on parole. Go out and intervene and do what you can to stop them reoffending. And I thought, I have a degree, I should know something, I should know what I'm doing. But actually, in meeting these people, they taught me about their needs, the risks that were ever present for them, and what it is that rehabilitation meant to them. What I quickly learnt with that caseload in particular, and every caseload following that, was that over 90% of those people had been impacted by domestic or family violence. So I never intended to get into this space, so the work that I do now, but it found me. And I was really saddened by that over time, that these were people that had experienced deep trauma in their childhoods, that went into their adulthoods and made choices that perhaps you and I may have made if we too were in those positions that the people found themselves in. I also had people that were subjected to awful amounts of sexual abuse and child abuse at the hands of people that said they loved them. And so I quickly matured. That was one thing that I did after I left university, but I also really built this passion around, why do we just keep building prisons and putting people in them? Why is that a thing? Why is it that police get bravery awards, or they get recognition, or they get promotion when they catch a criminal? Why don't we give it to them when they've prevented a crime? Why do we constantly respond to things and hope for the best? And so for me, I built a passion around prevention. How do we actually prevent this from all happening? Because by the time someone gets to prison, the devastation has happened. Your people's lives have been ruined, and that goes for the person who's been harmed, but also the person doing the harm. We know that everyone's life will never be the same again. We also know for that every prisoner, there's usually 25, 30 people in their immediate sphere who have been impacted by their violence. And so for me, I became, I suppose disgruntled is a good word, around building prisons, but also building refuges. So I found myself on the board of DV Connect after doing a secondment to a domestic violence service on the Gold Coast here, where I found that we had 137,000 phone calls annually to our service for women saying, it's too unsafe for me to live in my home, please can you help me? Now, what I knew being on the board was that we didn't have 137,000 refuge spots. We also didn't have funding for all of those women to go into refuge. So again, why did we just keep building refuges? Why was that the position that we took? Why were we all content with that? Well, not content, but that was where we kept investing our money in, like politically, socially. And so when I jumped on the board, I quickly learned that this isn't working. In fact, we could only respond to some 90% of the calls. So some of those calls even went unanswered. And that just was not good enough for me, because what if one of those calls was someone in urgent need of our support? And so, yeah, when Griffith knocked on my door and said, can I come and deliver this prevention program, I jumped at the chance, because prevention for me is the key. It's the hope. It's the hope around in this space. It's the hope around creating a world that feels safe and equal for everyone. And so that's what I'm doing here. So alongside being the director of the MATE program, which I'll talk more about in a moment, I'm also a director on the Queensland Parole Board. So I've kept a little hand in the parole system, and that's looking at whether people should be re-released and what it is that they've done in custody. I also sit on the Diversity and Safety Committee Board for Q Music, which is Big Sound. They do put on a Big Sound every year, which is all the artists and musos come from all over the world to Brisbane, and we want to make it as safe and equitable as we can for them. A number of other things. I also work as a psychologist through Magnus Health, and I am a mother of 3 children. And I say that one at the end like it's just a tag on, but actually that's the hardest gig of all. And it's also a really challenging time for kids growing up in the world today. So what is it that we can do to support them? That's a little bit about what I'm doing here. And I don't mention that I did my postgrad at Bond, because this is a Griffith alumni thing, so we don't go there. So what is MATE? What am I doing here? What are we talking about today? I'm really stoked that the 100-odd people that join me today are going to walk away with some tangible ways they can change the world. Some really big solutions to walk away today and go, I am someone who can do something. So MATE is a program developed around not the victim and perpetrator of violence, but the bystanders, the people who are around. I've worked with Alison Baden-Clay's family, Hannah Clark's family, Kelly Wilkinson's family, just to name a few. And all of them said, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we wish we had have had some tools and skills to intervene sooner, you know, before it was too late. So we developed this program and it's been running now inside the university for 7 years, and it's something that I think Griffith alumni should be incredibly proud of. So when it originated, it was funded wholly and solely by the university. We're at a point now where we're breaking even, just breaking even. But this program is about giving back, and it's about living the Griffith values. You know, it's a really, the Vice Chancellor is very passionate about this program and getting the message far and wide. So the beauty about this program, it's empowering you and I. The most uncomfortable thing is that the MATE message challenges you and I to be better people than we were when we came to this webinar today. And every part of us as human beings wants to go, but I am already a good human. But what I'm going to say to you is, I get it, so was I, and so am I, but every day I have to wake up and make a conscious decision to contribute to the solution. Because if I don't, if I just show my apathy, then I maintain status quo. And I just did a LinkedIn post earlier this morning, Bridget, you may have seen it, where I said enough. There are 14 women this year, actually 15 women as we speak, that have been murdered at the hands of their partner or former partner this year in this country. We are facing a national crisis. And today I'm angry. I'm angry at the lack of media attention. I'm angry at the lack of, you know, where's the channels stopping all their shows to talk about violence against women in this country? There is a very gendered nature of domestic violence. That's not to say that men can't be victims and women can't be perpetrators, but what we know is that the vast majority of domestic violence, including domestic violence homicide, is perpetrated by men against women. Majority of men are working with us and walking alongside us to find a solution. So I want to preface this by saying not all men, majority of men are really good human beings like the rest of us, but there's a pocket of men here who are doing the offending and they're ruining it for all of us. And so for me, this isn't a women's issue. This is a human issue. This is all of us saying we need to do better. How do we do that? Let's have a little bit of a look. I've talked a bit about MATE and what we are, but for any academics on here or anyone that wants to know a little bit more before we get started, we did have an independent evaluation of our program by ASA done 2 years ago now. And of that, we found that 90% of participants who completed our program felt more confident to intervene and stop problematic behaviour. And for me, that was I had a lot of tears that day in receiving that feedback, because I know this works, but to hear it, you know, from rigorous research is really great. Another thing that I want to say, and I forgot to say in my intro, is that I also have for 20 years run a program for men who are on domestic violence orders and are on parole. And so it's a program that I run once a week. It runs for 27 weeks and it's a rolling program. So the things that they say in that program, I bring in to inform this program, so I can tell you, actually, here's the things those men believe when they come to that program. And I hope that informs some of the conversation we have today. Oh, I'm going backwards. Oh, who we work with. Oh, can you hear that? It's flash. Go. So we work right across Australia, and actually in August we're going to New Zealand. We're also going into Malaysia and a couple of other countries towards the end of the year as well. The work that we do is largely in the construction and mining sector for this year, but in years gone by it's been in a lot of the city council areas and state government. So yeah, we'll go anywhere and have these conversations. Oh no, don't like that one. It feels a bit like showy. Okay, so let's talk about what sits underneath the surface of violence. What we know and what we see in the media, and you know what we all know and get horrified about, is the domestic violence or sexual violence that sits at the top of an iceberg, let's say. We all know it, we understand it, we can identify it. But what upholds that behaviour? What keeps it there? What are some of the things that you and I see in our everyday life that we perhaps don't realise are drivers of domestic violence? So here's some of the things that actually contribute. So if an iceberg, the tip of an iceberg makes up, say, 10%. We know that 90% sits underneath the iceberg. Now, if that 90% was to be taken away, the 10% up the top wouldn't survive on its own, right? That iceberg would melt and go away. So what we do know about violence against women is that for any of those things to happen at the top, those men have to subscribe and believe to the things that sit beneath. So I'm going to start with the first one there, rigid gender stereotypes. When I am standing in a training room and I ask people to identify, you know, when someone, very stereotypically, but when someone says to you, be a man or just man up, to the men in the room, tell me what they're asking you to be. And the men in the room, doesn't matter what room, where we go, men will say they want me to be tough, resilient, not show emotion, strong, be the provider, be the protector, be, you know, have a six-pack. Be dominant, not, you know, go in and demand what I want. And so how's that for pressure anyway? That box there for men is the primary driver of violence against women. It's also the primary driver of male suicide, and it's the primary driver of men's violence against other men. So if you're sitting here today and you're not even passionate about violence against women, but you're passionate about men's violence and men's mental health, really deconstructing that box and not suggesting that men have to fit in that to be a man is one beautiful way that today you and I can make sure we're doing something beneath that iceberg to not keep it there. If a man steps outside of that box for a day, a week, a month, a lifetime, he is called names. He is called a pussy, gay, a fag, a girl, a bitch. Very quickly, you see layers of oppression starting to form. You see that he is called a girl, and that being a girl is a criticism to a man. So very quickly, you start to see that we as women are insults to men. You see that our friends in the LGBTIQ community are also used as insults to those men. So very quickly, men get the idea that the only way for them to thrive and survive in society is to fit into that box, whether they subscribe to it or not. And so the pressure that those men feel to be strong and tough and not show emotion means that the only emotion that is allowed to be shown is anger, not even happiness. Have you ever seen a man be like overly happy that fits in that box? Not really, right? It's this stoic kind of like, you know, I'm stoic, I'm not quite happy, otherwise I'm angry. For the women's box, I'm not often told to woman up, but I'm often told to be a lady. And when I unpack when that was said to me when I was a child and what is meant by that, it was usually to be demure, be quiet, be polite, know my place, sit down, cross my legs, be pretty, be nurturing, be maternal. If I stepped out of that box for a day, a week, a month, a lifetime, people would call me names like butch, feminist, bitch, slut, whore. So very quickly, I get the messages that I should just get back into that box. Now, here's the bit that we need to, really listen into. For men who perpetrate violence, they absolutely subscribe to that box. They also believe that the woman in their life should subscribe to that lady box we just talked about. Because if she doesn't, if she steps outside of that, she starts to show a bit of power. And he should have the power because that's what he has in his man box, in his toolbox here. So those two things are what men who use violence absolutely subscribe to, but it's also what the broader society subscribes to, whether we like it or not. So oftentimes we go, well, it's not the 50s anymore. We've kind of outgrown that, but really we haven't. Marketing, advertising, song lyrics, movies we watch, we still 100% subscribe to that. We still believe that we should be those things. There is still a constant pull for me to fit into that box, especially when I'm around my dad or men, I still think very quickly, I should be there. I remember when my dad didn't want me to get a haircut or get my ears pierced and all of those types of things. Similarly for men, they never really get a full expression of self. They never get to explore their emotions. They never get to talk. They never kind of get to say I'm frustrated or I'm scared or I'm anxious. Before this, when we had a pre-meeting, Bridget and I were talking all about feeling anxious, right? About different things. Men in that box don't really get to explore all of that stuff. So we keep people stuck in those. And that's why I say, think about popular culture. Think about the last movie you watched where we didn't have those rigid gender stereotypes. Thankfully, Netflix and Stan and places like that are really starting to shift this. And I want us to be allies to that. I want us to celebrate that. That is true diversity and inclusion in action. And that is where we will start to pull these rigid gender stereotypes apart. Now, in saying that, a lot of people feel like, well, what if I'm happy in that box? What if I sit in it and I'm happy in it? And I say to people, if you're happy in it and no one's forcing you in it and you've chosen that and that's for you, that's fantastic. I don't want to tell you how to live your life. But if someone is forcing you to be in there and or society around you keeps pushing you back into those boxes, that's the issue that I have. Because when I go to an interview or when I present to a boardroom or when I go outside, I want someone to see me as Shaan, not a woman, not that box. I want you to see me as strong and resilient and nurturing and kind and passionate. I want you to see me for who I am. not what I am. The next part to that is sexist jokes. So if someone's telling a sexist joke in your workplace and you think, oh, that's so cringy, every time they tell that joke, it's so cringy, but you don't intervene, the message you are giving someone at that pointy end of that iceberg is that you agree with that joke. And sexist jokes are only told because there is a truth to them, right? We don't tell a joke with no... I don't tell a joke about a purple sky. It doesn't make any sense. So sexist jokes actually have a place to keep women in that box. So we as bystanders have to find a way to, again, intervene in that sexist joke and say, I don't get it. What's the joke? I don't see that as funny. That doesn't make sense to me. What are we back in the 1950s? Because we have to know that for the men I work with, and I also work with people convicted of sexual offences, they are never challenged around their behaviour. They never get a counter narrative. They never hear someone saying, hang on a second, you can't say that. When I ask them who's ever challenged their behaviour, they will categorically tell me no one ever has. Until they get to the point of conviction and prosecution for their crimes, none of their mates have ever said, hang on a sec, you really want to be saying that stuff? And so they continue to escalate in their behaviour. Similarly with sexist language, you know, or objectification of women or objectification of anyone, when we objectify people, we see them as a possession or a piece of meat, for want of a better word. With women, we're often objectified in movies, in popular culture. And what happens then is that for men who use the violence at the pointy end, they see us as their possession. You are my possession, therefore you will do what I say, therefore I have the power, therefore, you know, the counter or the unintended consequences that come from them objectifying you is that they don't then want anyone else to look at you. So jealousy becomes a really big part of their functioning. So objectifying anyone, to me, sits beneath that iceberg and is part of the problem. Similarly with the gender pay gap, I know a lot of people that say to me, oh, it's not really a big deal anymore. When I get paid $270,000 less than my male counterpart when I retire, that's significantly less. Do you know how many cruises I could go on with that? Do you know how many refuges or charities I could support with that? How many Christmas presents I could buy for children who have been victims of domestic violence with $270,000? Not to mention inflation and just paying my bills. So be really careful not to just skim over that, but really understand, why does it exist? In this day and age, why is the gender pay gap a thing? Why does it still exist? Because what we know about the gender pay gap is because of those boxes. If my colleague Dean goes for an interview or Bridget French goes for an interview and they present with all the same qualities, Dean is going to be seen to be assertive and my friend Bridget is going to be seen to be aggressive. Right? Or abrasive is the other word that we get. So who's going to get the job? Dean. When Bridget and Dean go for a promotion, they both know the same amount of things. But Dean backs himself. Dean backs himself because he's been brought up in that box where he has to go, I got this because I'm strong and I'm tough. Bridget has been brought up to be quiet and be polite. So she goes in going, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I did this. I'm not sure that I know all this stuff. I'm not sure I'm right for the job. Who gets the promotion? Dean. Then Bridget and Dean both go and have their children. Dean can come back earlier than Bridget because Bridget's breastfeeding until the child's 1. So Dean is building all of these skills inside the workplace. But Bridget's building all these skills about multitasking like no one's business outside of the workforce. Who then is seen as being more committed to the organisation? Dean. And that's how the gender pay gap really starts to play out. The gender pay gap is largely driven by places like the legal sector where they have billable hours. And they say, well, Bridget, Dean can be here for 18 hours a day. You've got to leave after 16. So I'm sorry, Dean gets this. Versus how incredible are you both in the skill sets that you bring? you're both such an asset. So we're starting to see for organisations that do recruit around diversity and inclusion, and I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about neurodiversity, I'm talking about friends in the LGBT community, I'm talking about different ethnicities and races. What they're finding is that their productivity is largely increasing, their diversity of thought is largely increasing, they're yielding better financial returns, because we all bring different skill sets to this thinking. So the gender pay gap is a really big passion of mine that I've built over time, and I'm not going anywhere in this space until we have equal pay. And the last one is victim blaming. So if I go to your lunchroom, Bridget, and you've got all these incredible policies and procedures around domestic violence in your workplace, and you've made them shiny and they're PDF and they're amazing, and you've spent thousands on them through a company that does it. But then I come into the lunchroom and you're reading the paper and you say, oh, what about this Brittany Higgins? Do you think she's made it up? Very quickly, I hear victim blaming, and I hear this is an unsafe workplace for me to disclose and seek support. So your thousands of dollars that you've spent in your documents mean nothing to me, because the culture that you've just shown me, especially if no one says anything about it, the culture you've just shown me shows we've got a victim blaming culture here. Can I say, of the thousands of women that I've worked with in the domestic violence space, most of them had employment at the beginning of their journey. Most of them left their organisation due to victim blaming. So before they even disclosed anything to their employer, they thought they wouldn't be believed because they'd heard conversation, narrative going around the office. So that one there is huge for me. Then obviously we see the things that sit at the pointy end up the top: domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape and murder. So if someone is sitting in a prison cell for rape and I'm standing outside reading the paper victim blaming Brittany Higgins, and someone next door is talking about the gender pay gap being a myth, and the prison's guards coming and telling a sexist joke and saying, come on mate, just man up, then these men are getting constant messages that we all think the same. We all think the same, and we all do that. We all behave the same. They got caught for it. We all think it. So for me, what can we do? We can make sure that beneath that iceberg, we are not contributing to any of those things. Again, in the workplace, what we found with bystander behaviour is that the same can be true for any of these other forms of violence and discrimination: racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, ageism. It all comes out through violent supportive attitudes. And in the workplace, people always talk about our culture. What's our culture like? Your culture, to me, I can pick in the lunchroom in the first 5 minutes. Because I would like to hear that if someone was to say something like that, well, no one would say something like that, but if one person was, everyone would pounce on it and say, actually, we don't talk like that here. That's not the culture that we have here. That's how we shift and change it. So a lot of the work that we do in organisations is around workplace culture as well, and how we can shift some of those beliefs. We also really delve into domestic violence because we know that all of the things beneath this iceberg here are actually forms of power and control. Why do people tell those jokes? So that people know their place. Why do people reinforce those stereotypes? To gain power and control, or to ensure that the dominant majority has power and control. So that's why we start with a conversation around domestic violence. We know that for the vast majority of especially homicide victims, there was little, if any, physical abuse up until the time of their murder. But there are a number of other things, they're now known as coercive control in Queensland, that were happening to those women at the hands of their partners. And so we have this power and control wheel was actually developed by victim survivors and perpetrators in the 80s in America. And we use this in our training every day, everywhere, with the consent of Duluth, because this is the best way to capture these women's experiences of what it feels like to be in a domestic violence relationship. And in part of my work to date, I worked as the manager of the domestic violence court, where women would go in and sit in a safe room, and then when they would come into the courtroom, that's the first time they would see their perpetrator. So when they'd go into the safe room, I would hand them this wheel, and I'd hand them a highlighter and a pen and say, go and find a spot to sit and highlight bits of this wheel that are happening to you and write examples of them, so that when we go into the courtroom, you can articulate what is happening to you. And the women would come back to me 5 minutes later and say, crying, and say, this is my life. Like, how did you know this was happening to me? And so people will then say to me, well, do perpetrators get a copy of this? Like, how do they know to do this? If you look at each part of this wheel, it is about gaining and maintaining power and control. So if I don't want Bridget to leave me, if we're in a relationship and I don't want Bridget to leave me, what do? First and foremost, I cut off her outside world. I cut off her friends and family. I cut off anyone she's close to. I find out who she's having lunch with at work. I cut off them. I do it by slowly infiltrating. Bridget, I don't like that person you have lunch with. They give me a bad look when I see them. If you really love me, you wouldn't have lunch with them. You wouldn't go to drinks on Friday because you and I should go to the movies together. Now, to me, it sounds like love in those early days. It sounds like we're in a loving relationship and this is just what we do. You know, we hang out with each other more. But as time goes on and I'm scared of losing Bridget, I will use different tactics around that wheel to gain and maintain my control over her. And that's how this works. So if you think about any form of violence and discrimination, it's driven by this need to have power and control. And a lot of time, like for instance, about a month ago, I was drawing on the whiteboard. I had these men in with me and we were drawing the continuum of when they get home from work to when they make threats to kill. And one of the men said to me, I get it now, Shaan. I threaten her to love me. I'm so scared of losing her that I threaten her to love me. And so that's really how this power and control plays out. What we know and what I said is that 15 women alone this year have been murdered at the hands of their partner or former partner. In our team here at MATE, we have Dave Kramer, who's one of our main trainers, and he was Hannah Clark's best friend. Hannah Clark was a woman killed in Brisbane alongside her 3 children by a man called Rowan Baxter. And Dave would say that Rowan used every single one of these things around this wheel on the daily with Hannah. He wouldn't let her wear certain clothes out in public. He wouldn't let her speak to certain people. He would threaten that she would never see the children again. He would monitor her every move. He would do everything around this wheel. The problem was her family had never seen this wheel. In fact, they'd never seen it until we met with them after her homicide. And her friends and family had been doing things like going into the police and demanding they do something because they knew that Hannah was going to be murdered, but they didn't have the words for it. So the power of this wheel and sharing this wheel with everyone you know is that you could potentially be saving a life. All of the things around this wheel will now constitute coercive control in Queensland and be illegal with the new legislation. And that will mean if any of these things are happening to you, you can take out a DVO, but also charge that person criminally. So if we had more time, we'd go right into detail about that. But of course, I'm inviting everyone to come and do some of our training so you build a good understanding of this. So what can we do? I wanted to bring you the hope today. What is it that we can all do to be part of the solution? What we know is that we're not all not intervening because we're bad people and we just don't care, right? We're not intervening for a number of reasons. Firstly, and most importantly, when I was a child and I went to school, I was told to not get involved in other people's business. I was told to not be nosy, sit down, know your place. What that taught me was that my opinion didn't matter, and I was also not a leader. I was a follower and I had to wait for other people to lead. Then when I get in the workplace and all of a sudden they're talking about leadership training, I'm looking around to see who the leaders are. And if you think about the qualities of a good leader, in your organisation, if I ask you to write down the qualities, it would be that they're kind and understanding and nurturing and driven and good at making decisions and sometimes stand alone, you know, that they're reasonable people, that they're fallible, but they're humble. And to me, those are the characteristics of a good human, which tells me that we're all leaders and we all have capacity in our personal leadership to create significant change. So when I look at the first reason why bystanders don't intervene, pluralistic ignorance, that rings so true to me, in that we're all kind of going, oh, well, Bridget's not doing anything and I look to her to lead and she's not, so I won't. It's almost like that I want to, but I won't kind of thinking. You know, when like the fire alarm goes off and you immediately look for the smart person in the room and you think, well, if they're not fleeing their desk, I won't flee. Personal leadership's about going, the fire alarm's going off, so we should all depart now, and using your leadership to be the first person to do that. And so that's just flipping our thinking. In organisations where I see really good workplace culture, I see 100% of the people in the organisation seeing themselves as a leader. So leadership training shouldn't just be about leaders as in the hierarchical sense. It should be about everyone seeing themselves as a leader with capacity to create change. If I own it and you own it, we own it together, then we're responsible for it. The second reason why people don't intervene is actually fear. And fear is a really important physiological cue that my body gives me that says, Shaan, there's trouble ahead. I never want to tell anyone to be fearless. I don't like fearless campaigns because it's impossible to never feel fear. And in fact, your body wants you to feel fear. It's one of the best mechanisms we have built inside of us. But I want you to be able to navigate with that fear to do something. The third one is that leadership conversation. And of course, we don't want to make it worse or get it wrong. The problem with being an effective bystander, especially around domestic violence, is that you're not going to get messages from anyone that you've saved the day. So if Bridget comes to me and says, Shaan, I'm really concerned about you, I might say to her, oh, thanks, Bridget, but I've got this. Now, Bridget will get the response, or she'll feel internally like, uh-oh, I've overstepped the mark, I shouldn't have said anything. But the message she's actually given me is one of help and support. So in that moment, I'm in survival mode, so I'm just going, back it off, Bridget, I've got this. But actually internally, I'm going, oh, good, Bridget's a safe person I can come to if I need to. Similarly, the person who's using the violence or causing me harm is going to say, back off, Bridget, you don't know what you're talking about. Shaan is the perpetrator, I'm the victim, you've got no clue. So Bridget's going to get really confused very quickly about, well, actually, what am I doing here? So what we say to people is, there's so many things you actually can do. The first one is direct. So like I said before, if Bridget was to come to me and say, Shaan, I'm really concerned about you. I've noticed, you know, you just seemed a little bit down or different lately. I'm just letting you know I'm here. In that moment, she's sending me a message of help and support. Similarly, if I was the person doing the harm and Bridget came and said, I'm really worried about you at the moment. Is everything okay for you? She's sending a message of help and accountability to me as well. So I've seen your behaviour, I've seen it, and I'm here for you. So what I will say to people is direct doesn't have to look like calling out my behaviour. Direct should look like calling me in. So if people had have called Rowan Baxter in every time he spoke poorly about Hannah, hey, Rowan, I'm really concerned about the way you're talking about Hannah. Is everything okay for you? Let's go to dinner and talk about it. Let's have some conversations about what's happening for you. Then in that moment, he can say, you can back off, I've got this. But he still hears those messages of help and accountability, and I still hear a message of help and support. Indirectly, if you say you hear a joke a sexist joke in the lunchroom and you think, what am I going to do about it? Indirectly, it could be that afterwards you don't know what to do in the moment, and oftentimes people think, oh, I didn't say anything and now the moment's lost. Approach that person afterwards and say, you know that joke you told? Oh, that wasn't cool. What's going on for you? Or approaching me and say, I'm sorry, Shaan, as the woman in that room, that you had to hear that. Are you okay? That's a really beautiful indirect approach. If you're seeing something before your eyes happening and you think, uh-oh, what am I going to do? I've got to think of something to do something afterwards. Even if you've seen something and you need to call police the day after and say, you know what, I saw something yesterday on the train that wasn't okay. I didn't do anything at the time because I was fearful, but I just want to ring now and let you know. I think his name was Lance. I think they got off the train at Brisbane South. They were heading in the north direction. Those bits of information could be a piece of the puzzle police need to follow up a lead. And oftentimes what I know about policing is that they don't have those little bits of information that they so often need. So with domestic violence especially, police can take out a DVO, but they need enough evidence. And they lack evidence because it won't come from the victim. The victim will more often than not say, I'm not taking out an order because I'm too fearful. So police rely on bystanders like you and I to put our hand up and say, I saw something as well. Distraction to me is another thing we can do. So how do I, if someone's telling a sexist joke in the workplace and I haven't intervened, but every time they say something, I lean across them and say, Bridget, do you want a coffee? I'm just going to go and grab a coffee order. If I do that every time they tell that same joke just before they get to the punchline, then we hear very quickly that, oh, Shaan's not comfortable with this. Like, we read body language and we read what's not said very quickly. Yes, I may not solve that sexist joke telling in that moment, but it might be what I can do. And don't forget, there's layers to this. I'm not saying that any one of these techniques is better than the other, because it's doing something as opposed to everyone going, oh, cringe, Shaan's on her way, she's the one that tells those jokes that are terrible, oh no. And then everyone sits there and I tell it. What does the new person think? What does it say when I get a promotion for the next job that's coming through and I've been the one telling those jokes? What does it say for culture? Right? So if you're someone sitting there and who's not intervening, then you're kind of enabling status quo, which is a really terrible thought. And the fourth one there is protocol. So that's saying if Bridget was to tell the sexist joke, that's me going up to her and saying, Bridge, I love working with you, but did you realise they've just sent out like 10 emails about code of conduct and those jokes are in there? You can't tell them here. I'd hate for you to lose your job over this. So it's telling someone about protocol or also setting it yourself. So me saying to Bridget, I love hanging out with you, but those jokes you tell, they're not for me. Just don't tell them when you're around me. And what that does very clearly gives Bridget the message that I'm still your mate, I just don't like your jokes. But it sets a boundary. And too often, we set boundaries when we're parents. We say, don't come in here with your shoes on, don't swear in my house. But we don't often set boundaries around what we find acceptable in this space. Why is it that my parents set boundaries around me saying swear words, but they didn't set boundaries around some of this really important behaviour? So this framework, I want you to know that you don't just need to have a hammer in your toolkit. If you come across something, either beneath the iceberg or above it, just think of this quadrant and think, what is it that I can do? Because say you see something on a train and you directly intervene and say, is everything okay here? Or you say, sorry to interrupt, does anyone have the time? And then you go, is everything okay here? So you use a bit of distraction and a bit of direct. But you're not the only bystander on that train. Bridget then comes in and says, hey, I'm pretty sure the security's coming through in a minute, and someone else presses the alarm on the train and someone else calls police and someone else does whatever. We then show the victim or the person receiving that harm that in our culture here, we do not support this behaviour. And we show the person perpetrating it that, hey, that won't wash here. And that is how we shift culture. We don't wait for the pointy end of town to introduce new legislation. The introduction of legislation is meant to make us think about human behaviour and change the way we do things. This framework is how we do it. What we have done at Be There, so our little program here, Mate, we also developed an app 2 years ago called Be There, and it's exactly what you just saw in that wheel, but in a free app produced by the state government and Telstra, and Griffith now own this app. It's lockable, and you can have a look at whether you're seeing, hearing or sensing domestic violence. You can look up what you think it is, and then it will give you the ability to journal what you're seeing. It'll also give you information and articles. You'll be able to send them messages of support. You'll be able to find out where they can go for support. So this app to me is kind of how our give back to everyone around how we think we can change the world. So I urge everyone here to download this, and if you work in an organisation like Telstra, for instance, they've shared this as under their EAP as one of their supports they offer to staff. Currently, we've had over 15,500 downloads of this app, and we're hoping to take it to New Zealand later this year as well and launch it there. Oh, look, there's two shameless plugs there for it. And that's it from me. What I would love to do is urge everyone to jump on our social media, on our LinkedIn, reach out to us via email. If we haven't already worked with your organisation, we would love to. And if you would like to come and do our training, we actually offer a 4-day now, Train the Trainer, which enables you to know everything that I've just imparted today and go and deliver it within your organisation as well. Over to you, Bridget.
Oh, thank you, Shaan. What an incredibly valuable session. We do have time for a few questions, if that's okay with you. Personally, I just found that so powerful and valuable, particularly around, you know, being a better human. Those distraction techniques are just fantastic. But we do have some questions in the thing, and we'll see how many we get through. Liz has asked, with the increase in DV, is there also an increase in men's violence to men? Is it an increase in violence overall? Thanks, Liz.
What an amazing question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I really don't. I know that we usually see an increase of violence against women around this time of the year, and it's largely because this is very anecdotal. I'd love someone to do a PhD on it. Around Christmas time, a lot of women stay in their relationships because they don't want to, you know, they've got children, it's Christmas. So they kind of stay stuck in those relationships, and then around January, February, they start to develop an exit plan. We know that when women are leaving those relationships is the highest risk time for them, so it takes a good few months for the exit plan to kind of come to fruition. So the spike that we see in May and June, we often see every year, and that's just, to me, I've had enough. It's absolutely a national crisis. In terms of the increase in men's violence, I'm going to have a look at that so I know that answer next time around. It's a great question.
Thanks, Shaan. Josh has asked, what would you recommend to do when a close friend shares they are in an abusive relationship? Are there some good online resources you could recommend? And we can put some resources in the chat. I know you probably say the Be There app, which is an incredibly fantastic resource. Anything else you can recommend?
Definitely. If our two ambassadors to our are Matt and Sarah Brown from She Is Not Your Rehab. If someone can find the link, they have a TED Talk, which is, get ready for tears, but a life-changing TED Talk around violence. And our other ambassador is Jess Hill, who is a journalist. She released the series See What You Made Me Do, which is on SBS. And she's also got a book named See What You Made Me Do as well. I would definitely recommend looking up both of them. But internally in our organisation at Griffith, we've also got a number of fantastic researchers in this space who know a lot. But just in terms of local resources and how you can access support for your friends, you want to be an effective bystander, right? There is no better tool than showing up with food and saying, I'm here for you. My support doesn't have an expiry. There is no judgment attached to anything here. I've got you. I've got your back. What do you need from me? To me, that doesn't even take a presentation like this. You asking that question shows me you're a good human that wants to do that for your friend. That's all you need to do. And the second part to that is learn about the local resources in your area. For instance, at DVPC, I know that they help women with, credit cards if they need them, or mobile phones, or safety watches if they need to escape and they need a safety watch. I know that they can give brokerage to women. I know they've got about a 2-week wait for appointment time. So get to know your local DV services and what they offer. So when you're offering support to someone, it can be actually helpful information.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks, Shaan. Yeah, it's so important to know what is available to us. There is a lot out there. Next question is, how do you create meaningful change in viewing habits and perceptions for film and TV shows when a lot of people just accept the current state of things? Where do people find films that represent women and men in better ways?
Oh, what an incredible question. Whoever wrote that, reach out to me, because I hope you're in film and television and that's what you're going to do for a career. They need better advisors. So they need advisors. They need people who, I mean, even sometimes with the best of intentions, they can kind of get it a bit wrong. They need advisors. If you look on, I'm gonna write a list of some of the good ones that are kind of shifting the narrative, but they're few and far between. We have to do that. There's a lot of musicians or artists now that will preface their songs at the beginning of concerts by saying, I wrote these lyrics when I was in another place. I now know better. I'm going to sing this. Don't stand by these lyrics. I don't believe in them. Yeah. I know we're putting better warnings at the beginning of TV shows, like to say that this involves these types of things. But I know we're probably going to go over time, but Bridget, there's been some new research out that suggests that violent video games don't actually indicate that children are going to become violent, right? There was a big concern that children play Grand Theft Auto, they're going to become violent. What's the reason for that? Because there's a counter narrative at home. So children then get in the car with mum and dad who drive the speed limit, who don't go shooting people out their window, who stop at the stop sign and those. So they're getting a counter narrative to what they're playing in the video game. So they know the video game then isn't real. Whereas when they watch things on TV shows and they're hearing all this stuff, there is no counter in their world. So for students where they're living with domestic violence, they're seeing this on TV, there is no healthy, safe relationships. So we need to counter that in every way. It starts by celebrating when you are in a healthy, safe relationship and seeing that in your peers and starting to verbalise it. So Bridget, I love it when I go out with you and your partner for dinner. I love the way that you talk about each other. It's really healthy. We need to start a narrative that feels like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we probably have time for one more question. I will just let everyone know that any questions we don't get to today, we will try and answer in our post-event email. Shaan has raised a lot of fabulous resources that we will put in the post-event email to this webinar. So don't worry, we'll try to get to them all. But the final question is, what's the best way to deal with your boss's discrimination, intimidation and disrespect because of your race and socioeconomic status? How can we hold them accountable without being blocked in the job market?
Wow, I love that I got that with 30 seconds to go. What an incredible question. Reach out to me if you can via email. I'd love to support you in doing that. Oftentimes that person, that's about power and control, and that's why we focus on that power and control wheel. Those wheels, they also have some that talk to hierarchical and structural power. I urge you to look up those. If you look up Duluth, D-U-L-U-T-H, you'll see all the different wheels there. Start there and write some examples of what's happening to you so you can articulate that, and then come to me because I'd love to put you in touch with people who can support you on that journey to do that. But I can share with you a story of someone recently who did this training, and then a new DG started in the organisation. And the DG sent a hello email introducing themselves and used some language in it which wasn't inclusive. The very next day, someone sent him an email and said, actually, thanks for your email, but your messaging wasn't inclusive. That DG the next day sent a company-wide email again saying, I'm very sorry, I got my language wrong yesterday. I'm going to learn and do better. I urge you to hold me accountable every step of the way. So to me, that's personal leadership in beautiful form. We don't ask for perfection, do we? We just ask for people to, when they know better, do better. So I'd be interested in helping that person do more of that.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is pretty much all we have time for. Shaan, thank you so much today for your incredible expertise and insights on that. I know we are all we're all better humans for doing this, making the time to attend this webinar today. I personally am going to make a conscious decision to be a better human being. calling in, calling out, distraction, protocol. These are all really useful tips we can all take away and have in our toolbox for being an effective bystander. I just want to remind everyone, we recorded the session today, so please keep an eye on your emails. We will send you the link to this recording so that you will have this resource. It will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. Again, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, that's Griffith University Alumni and Giving, so that you're notified when it's up there. In your inbox in the next few weeks, we will send out a survey. We'd really value your feedback on the session today and also any suggestions you have for future topics. Another Griffith Alumni Lunch and Learn professional development webinar will be coming very soon, a brand new topic with another Griffith alumnus speaker. Again, huge thank you to Shaan for today, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon.